The bullet tore through the saloon window just as Sarah Mitchell ducked behind the bar, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. And in that moment, she realized that coming to Abilene, Kansas in the spring of 1875 might have been the worst decision of her 22 years. Glass shattered across the wooden floor like scattered diamonds, and the screaming started immediately. Sarah pressed herself against the liquor cabinet, her hands trembling as she heard boots thundering across the floorboards above her head. She had only been working at the Prairie Rose for 3 weeks, serving drinks and keeping the books for Mrs. Henderson, and already she was caught in the middle of a gunfight between rival cattle outfits. Everyone stay down. A deep voice commanded, cutting through the chaos like a knife through butter. Sarah dared to peek around the edge of the bar. A tall man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun streaming through the ruined window. He wore a dusty brown hat, a leather vest over a work-worn shirt, and his hand rested on the revolver at his hip with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how to use it. His jaw was set firm, and even from across the room, Sarah could see the intensity in his eyes. "The fight is over," the man said, his voice steady and calm despite the tension crackling through the air. "Taylor, you and your boys get on out of here before the marshal shows up. This is done." A gruff voice answered from somewhere near the poker tables. "Says who, Dalton?" "Says me." "And says common sense. You keep this up, and nobody rides out of here except in a pine box. That what you want?" There was a long moment of silence, broken only by someone's labored breathing and the tinkle of falling glass. Then Sarah heard the scrape of chairs, the shuffle of boots, and muttered curses as men filed toward the back door. The tension in the room slowly deflated like a punctured water skin. The man called Dalton stayed where he was until the last footstep faded. Then he turned, surveying the damage with a weary expression that suggested this was not the first time he had talked down a fight. His gaze swept across the room and landed on Sarah, still crouched behind the bar. "You hurt, miss?" he asked, walking toward her with long, measured strides. Sarah shook her head, not trusting her voice. She stood slowly, brushing splinters of glass from her navy blue dress. Her legs felt like water, but she forced herself to stand straight. She had learned early in life that showing weakness invited trouble. "I am fine," she managed, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "Thank you for intervening." He nodded, removing his hat. His hair was dark brown, sun-streaked in places and slightly too long. His face was weathered from years in the sun, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. Sarah guessed he was perhaps 28 or 29, old enough to have seen plenty but young enough to still believe he could make a difference. "Name is Cole Dalton," he said. "I work for the Double Bar Ranch about 10 miles west of town. Those boys who just left work for a competing outfit, they have been at each other's throats all season." "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, finally finding her composure. "I keep the books here and help Mrs. Henderson with serving when it gets busy." Mrs. Henderson herself came bustling out from the back room, her round face flushed with indignation. "Good Lord above, Cole Dalton, I could kiss you for stopping that nonsense. Those fools were about to tear my establishment apart." Cole smiled then, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. It was a good smile, genuine and warm, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Just trying to keep the peace, Mrs. Henderson," he said. Over the next hour, Sarah helped clean up the glass while Mrs. Henderson arranged for the window to be repaired. Cole stayed to help, sweeping shards into a dustpan and righting overturned chairs. Sarah found herself acutely aware of his presence, the way he moved with quiet efficiency, the way he checked to make sure everyone was truly all right before he focused on the cleanup. "You are new to Abilene," Cole said as they worked. It was not a question. 3 weeks, Sarah confirmed. "I came from Illinois. My father died last winter and there was nothing left for me there." She did not mention the rest. Did not mention the sickness that had taken her mother when Sarah was 16, or the fever that had ravaged her own body a year later, leaving her weak for months. Did not mention what the doctor had told her in that cold, clinical voice. The damage was permanent, she would never bear children. At the time, it had seemed like a distant concern. Now, at 22, it felt like a shadow that followed her everywhere. "Illinois is a long way," Cole said, his voice gentle. "Takes courage to start over in a new place." "Or desperation," Sarah said, then immediately regretted her honesty, but when she glanced at Cole, she saw only understanding in his expression, no judgment. "Sometimes they are the same thing," he said quietly. After the cleanup was finished, Mrs. Henderson insisted on giving Cole a drink on the house. He accepted a whiskey, nursing it slowly at the bar while the afternoon crowd began to trickle in. Sarah went back to work, recording the day's receipts in the ledger, but she kept stealing glances at the cowboy who had appeared like some kind of guardian angel in her moment of fear. "He is a good man," Mrs. Henderson murmured, appearing at Sarah's elbow. "Lost his parents to cholera when he was just 15. Worked his way up from nothing to become foreman at the Double Bar. Everyone in town respects Cole Dalton." Sarah said nothing, but she filed the information away, adding it to the picture she was building in her mind. Before Cole left, he stopped by the end of the bar where Sarah was working. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his hat in his hands, "I hope you will not judge Abilene too harshly based on today. It is usually a decent town." "I do not judge easily," Sarah said. "And I have you to thank for making sure today did not end far worse than it did." He nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "If you ever need anything, the Double Bar is not hard to find. Just follow the main road west until you see the painted fence." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah with a strange warmth in her chest and the echo of his voice in her ears. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Sarah woke early in the small room she rented above the general store, helped Mrs. Henderson prepare the saloon for the day, kept the books, served drinks in the evening, and fell into bed exhausted. It was hard work, but honest, and Sarah found she liked the structure of it. She liked Mrs. Henderson, who was kind beneath her gruff exterior, and she liked feeling useful. Cole Dalton came into town every few days, always on some errand for the ranch. And somehow, his errands always seemed to include stopping by the Prairie Rose. Sometimes, he would nurse a single drink at the bar, chatting with Mrs. Henderson and nodding politely to Sarah. Sometimes he would arrive at closing time, offering to walk Sarah back to her room when the streets were dark and dangerous. "You do not have to keep doing this," Sarah said one evening as they walked slowly down the wooden sidewalk. The spring air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. "I know I do not have to," Cole replied. "I want to." Sarah felt her heart skip. She was not naive. She knew what this attention meant, knew that Cole was courting her in his quiet, respectful way. And the terrifying truth was that she wanted him too. In the weeks since that first meeting, she had found herself thinking about him constantly. The way he tipped his hat when he saw her. The way his voice dropped low and gentle when they talked. The way he looked at her like she was something precious. But beneath the growing warmth between them, Sarah carried her secret like a stone. She knew she needed to tell him. Knew that it was not fair to let him keep pursuing her when she could never give him the children a man like Cole would surely want. A good man, a family man, deserved to build a future with someone whole. The thought of telling him made her sick with dread, but she knew she had to do it before things went any further. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. A week later, Cole appeared at the saloon just after noon when the place was nearly empty. He looked more nervous than Sarah had ever seen him, turning his hat in his hands like a schoolboy. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "Sarah, if I may be so bold, I was wondering if you might take a ride with me this Sunday. There is a spot about an hour from town up along the Smoky Hill River. It is beautiful this time of year." Sarah's heart clenched. This was it. This was the moment when courtship became something more, when intentions were declared and futures were discussed. She could not let him take her on that ride without knowing the truth. Cole, she said softly, setting down the glass she had been drying. Could we talk outside for a moment? His expression shifted, concern replacing the nervous hope. Of course. They walked out into the bright Kansas sunshine. The street was busy with wagons and horses, with women carrying baskets and men conducting business. Sarah led Cole around to the side of the building, where a narrow alley provided some privacy. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. Her hands were shaking, so she clasped them together tightly. "Before this goes any further, you need to know," Cole said nothing, just waited with that patient, steady expression that made Sarah want to weep. "I was very ill when I was 17, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "A terrible fever that lasted for weeks. I survived, obviously, but the doctors said it caused damage, internal damage." She took a shaky breath, feeling tears prick at the back of her eyes. "I can never give you children," she confessed sadly, finally speaking the words that had haunted her for 5 years. "I will never be able to bear a child. I am broken in a way that cannot be fixed." The silence that followed felt eternal. Sarah could not bear to look at Cole's face, could not stand to see the disappointment or pity she knew would be there. She stared instead at the dusty ground, at her worn boots, waiting for him to make some excuse and walk away. But Cole did not walk away. Instead, he reached out and gently took her hand. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "look at me." She forced herself to raise her eyes. What she saw in his face was not pity or disappointment. It was something fiercer, something that made her breath catch. "Then we will love each other," Cole said firmly. "That is all that matters. We will love each other." Sarah felt the tears spill over then, running hot down her cheeks. "But you should have a family," she protested weakly. "Children of your own, you deserve that." Cole shook his head, his grip on her hand tightening. "I deserve a life with a woman I can respect and cherish and build something real with. Sarah, I have been watching you these past weeks, and I see how kind you are, how hard you work, how brave you were when you could have panicked. I see your heart. That is what I want. That is what I choose." "You say that now," Sarah whispered, "but what about 5 years from now, 10, when all your friends have children and you do not? You will resent me." "No," Cole said with absolute certainty. "I will not. Sarah, I lost my parents when I was just a kid. I know what it is like to have family torn away, but I also learned that family is not just about blood. It is about the people you choose to stand beside. If we want children in our lives someday, there are orphans all over this territory who need homes. We could give them a future. But even if we never do that, even if it is just the two of us for the rest of our lives, that would be enough. More than enough." Sarah could not speak. The emotion clogging her throat was too thick, too overwhelming. She had spent 5 years believing she was damaged goods, that no good man would want her once he knew the truth. And here was Cole Dalton, standing in a dusty alley behind a saloon, holding her hand like it was something precious, telling her she was enough. "Why?" she finally managed. "Why would you choose this? Choose me?" Cole smiled then, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "Because when I am with you, the world makes sense," he said simply. "Because you make me want to be better. Because I look at you and I see my future, Sarah Mitchell, not some imagined future with a passel of kids. My actual future with you beside me. That is all I need." Sarah let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Cole, burying her face against his chest. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, and Sarah felt something inside her that had been clenched tight for years finally loosen. "So is that a yes to Sunday?" Cole murmured against her hair, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Sunday dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a promise. Cole arrived at the general store with a wagon and a basket of food that Mrs. Henderson had helped him pack. Sarah wore her best dress, a pale green cotton with tiny white flowers, and had carefully braided her honey-colored hair. The ride to the Smoky Hill River was everything Cole had promised. The prairie stretched out in every direction, green and gold under the wide blue sky. Meadowlarks sang from fence posts, and clusters of wildflowers dotted the grassland. Sarah felt the tension she had been carrying for weeks slowly melt away as the wagon rocked gently along the dirt road. Cole talked as they rode, telling her about the Double Bar Ranch, about the cattle drives he had been on, about his dreams of someday owning a small spread of his own. Sarah listened and asked questions, fascinated by this man who had seen so much but remained fundamentally kind. The spot Cole had chosen was perfect. A bend in the river created a small beach of smooth stones, surrounded by cottonwood trees just beginning to leaf out. The water burbled over rocks, creating a peaceful music. Cole spread a blanket on the grass and they unpacked the basket. Cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of lemonade. They ate and talked for hours. Sarah told Cole about her childhood in Illinois, about helping her father in his small dry goods store, about the books she loved to read. She told him about her mother's death, about the fear and loneliness that had followed. Cole listened with his full attention, never interrupting, his eyes warm with understanding. "You have been through a lot," he said when she finally fell silent, "but you are still here, still standing. That takes real strength, Sarah." "I do not always feel strong," she admitted. "Strength is not about never being afraid," Cole said. "It is about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. You left everything you knew and came out here alone. That is courage." After they finished eating, Cole stood and offered Sarah his hand. "Walk with me." They strolled along the riverbank, their fingers intertwined. The afternoon sun was warm on Sarah's face, and she felt a contentment she had not experienced in years. Being with Cole was easy, natural, like finding a part of herself she had not known was missing. "Sarah," Cole said, stopping beneath a large cottonwood tree. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I want you to know my intentions. I want to court you properly. I want to build something real with you. And when the time is right, if you will have me, I want to marry you." Sarah's breath caught. "Cole, I am not asking yet," he said quickly. "I know it is too soon, but I want you to know where my heart is. I want you to have time to decide if this is what you want too. There is no pressure. No expectation, just honesty." Sarah looked up at this good, honest man who had somehow walked into her life at exactly the moment she needed him most. "I want that too," she said softly. "I want to see where this goes, with you." Cole's smile could have lit up the entire prairie. He reached out and gently cupped her face with one calloused hand. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice low and rough. "Yes," Sarah breathed. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah felt like she was glowing from the inside out. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Sarah's life. Cole came to town every Sunday, and they spent the day together, exploring the area around Abilene, talking and laughing and slowly building the foundation of something permanent. On the days when Cole could not come to town, he sent letters, sweet, simple notes that Sarah treasured. Mrs. Henderson watched the romance unfold with obvious approval. "That boy is smitten," she told Sarah one evening, "and you are good for him." "I have known Cole since he first came to Abilene, and I have never seen him this happy." Sarah's life in Abilene expanded beyond just work. She made friends with some of the other women in town, attending church socials and quilting circles. She discovered she had a talent for organizing the saloon's accounts, and Mrs. Henderson began talking about making her a partner in the business someday. For the first time since her father's death, Sarah felt like she had a real home. Summer arrived in full force, bringing hot winds and the constant movement of cattle drives through town. The Prairie Rose was busier than ever, full of cowboys looking to spend their pay after weeks on the trail. Sarah learned to navigate the chaos, to deflect unwanted attention with a firm word and a steady gaze. Cole's frequent presence helped. The cowhands knew he was courting Sarah, and they respected him enough to leave her alone. In August, Cole took Sarah to meet his boss at the Double Bar Ranch. The owner, a weathered man named Tom Brennan, greeted Sarah with warmth and told her that Cole was like a son to him. Mrs. Brennan, a kind woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes, pulled Sarah aside after dinner. "Cole told us about your situation," Mrs. Brennan said gently. "I want you to know, dear, that Tom and I understand. We were never able to have children of our own. It was a grief for a while, I will not lie, but we built a good life anyway. And Cole has been like a son to us. Family is what you make it." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." As autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, Cole asked Sarah to take another ride with him, back to the spot on the Smoky Hill River where they had shared their first kiss. Sarah knew what was coming. She had seen it in the way Cole looked at her lately, had heard it in the careful way he talked about the future. They sat on the same blanket by the same stretch of river, but everything was different now. They knew each other deeply, had shared their fears and hopes and dreams. When Cole took Sarah's hand, she felt completely calm. "Sarah Mitchell," Cole said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "these past months with you have been the best of my life. You make me laugh. You challenge me to think differently. You see the best in people, even when they do not deserve it. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's ring. It is the only thing of hers I have left. I would be honored if you would wear it. Sarah, will you marry me?" Sarah's vision blurred with tears. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Cole, I love you. I want to build a life with you." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her, deep and passionate, and Sarah felt like her heart might burst with joy. They were married in October in a simple ceremony at the Abilene Church. Mrs. Henderson cried through the entire service, and Tom Brennan walked Sarah down the aisle with fatherly pride. Sarah wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Brennan had helped her sew, and Cole wore his best suit, looking so handsome that Sarah could barely breathe when she first saw him. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Sarah like she was his entire world. Because she was. They moved into a small house on the Double Bar property, a cozy two-room cabin that Cole had spent weeks fixing up. He had built new furniture, repaired the roof, and even installed glass windows. Sarah turned it into a home, sewing curtains, arranging their few possessions, creating a space that felt like theirs. Married life suited them. Cole left early each morning to work on the ranch, and Sarah continued keeping the books for Mrs. Henderson, working 3 days a week. In the evenings, they would sit together on their small porch, watching the sun set over the prairie, talking about their day. At night, they learned each other in the privacy of their bedroom, and Sarah discovered a joy in physical intimacy that she had never imagined. But there were hard moments, too. Moments when Sarah saw Cole watching the Brennans' young nephew playing in the yard, a wistful expression on his face. Moments when women in town asked Sarah when she would be starting a family, and she had to smile and deflect. Moments when Sarah felt the old familiar guilt rising up, telling her that Cole had settled for less than he deserved. One evening in November, about a month after their wedding, Sarah was preparing dinner when Cole came home early. She heard the heaviness in his footsteps and turned to find him standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands, looking troubled. "Cole, what is wrong?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I ran into Daniel Patterson in town today. He was going on about his new baby, his third, and he asked me when we were going to get around to starting a family." Sarah's stomach clenched. "What did you say?" "I told him to mind his own business," Cole said, his voice tight with frustration. "But Sarah, it made me realize something. People are going to keep asking, keep making assumptions, and I hate that it puts you in an uncomfortable position." Sarah set down the spoon she had been holding and wiped her hands on her apron. "Cole, if you are having doubts—" "No," Cole said sharply, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He took Sarah's face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "No doubts, never doubts. I love you, Sarah Dalton. I love our life. I love coming home to you every evening. I love waking up beside you every morning. You are enough. You have always been enough." "Then what are you saying?" Sarah whispered. Cole's expression softened. "I am saying maybe we should talk about what we want, really talk about it. Because if you want children in our lives, if that would make you happy, there are ways to make that happen. Mrs. Brennan told me that the Reverend knows of several orphan children looking for homes. There is a boy," she said, "about 8 years old. His parents died of fever and he has been staying with different families in the area. He needs a permanent home." Sarah felt her heart skip. "You would want that, to take in someone else's child. If he became ours, he would not be someone else's child," Cole said gently. "He would be our son. And Sarah, I will be honest with you. I think I would love that. I think I would love having a child to teach and raise and guide. But only if it is what you want to. Only if it would make you happy and not just remind you of what we cannot have biologically." Sarah felt tears slide down her cheeks. She thought about the years she had spent believing she would never have a family, that the fever had stolen that possibility from her forever. And here was Cole, offering her a different path, a different kind of family built on choice and love rather than biology. "I think I would like to meet him," Sarah said softly. "This boy, I would like to see if maybe we could give him the home he needs." Cole's smile was brilliant. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "We will talk to the Reverend this Sunday." The boy's name was Matthew. He was 9 years old, small for his age, with a mop of dark hair and eyes that had seen too much sadness. The Reverend explained that Matthew's parents had been homesteaders who had died during a fever outbreak the previous spring. Since then, Matthew had been shuffled between families, never quite fitting in, never quite finding a place to belong. When Cole and Sarah met Matthew for the first time in the Reverend's small office, the boy was quiet and wary. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, his gaze darting between the adults like he was waiting for the trap to spring. "Hello, Matthew," Sarah said gently, crouching down so she was at his eye level. "My name is Sarah and this is my husband Cole. The Reverend tells us you are looking for a home." Matthew nodded but said nothing. Cole knelt beside Sarah. "We have a small place out on the Double Bar Ranch. It is quiet, but there is plenty of space to run around. We have horses, and Tom Brennan, who owns the ranch, is teaching me how to train them. I thought maybe if you came to stay with us, I could teach you too. Would you like that?" For the first time, a flicker of interest crossed Matthew's face. "You have horses?" "Lots of them," Cole said with a smile. "And cattle too, though they are not as interesting. But the horses are something special. There is a paint mare named Sadie who is gentle as a lamb. She would be perfect for learning to ride." "I rode once," Matthew said quietly. "With my pa, before he got sick." Sarah's heart clenched. "Your pa taught you well then. Cole and I would like you to come stay with us, Matthew. We would like to give you a real home, not just a place to sleep, but a family, if you would like that." Matthew looked at them with those two old eyes. "And if I am bad, if I break something or cause trouble, will you send me away?" "No," Cole said firmly. "If you come home with us, you are ours. That means when you make mistakes, we help you learn from them. That means we stick together no matter what. That is what family does." Matthew's lower lip trembled. "Do you promise?" "I promise," Cole said. "We both promise," Sarah added, reaching out to take Matthew's small hand. 2 weeks later, Matthew moved into the cabin with Cole and Sarah. It was an adjustment for all of them. Matthew was quiet and withdrawn at first, waiting for the other shoe to drop, testing boundaries to see if Cole and Sarah meant what they had said. But slowly, gradually, he began to thaw. Cole was patient and kind, spending his evenings teaching Matthew about horses and ranching. Sarah helped Matthew with his reading and arithmetic, discovering that he was bright and curious when given the chance. They established routines, small rituals that made the cabin feel like home. Breakfast together every morning, evening walks before supper, stories before bed. The first time Matthew laughed, really laughed, was 3 weeks after he had moved in. Cole was trying to teach him how to lasso a fence post and kept missing spectacularly. Matthew giggled, then clapped his hand over his mouth like he was afraid he would get in trouble. But Cole just grinned and handed Matthew the rope. "You think you can do better? Show me." Matthew's throw was wobbly but managed to catch the post. His face lit up with pride, and Sarah, watching from the porch, felt her heart expand. Winter came, blanketing the prairie in snow. The cabin was cozy and warm, heated by the fire Cole kept burning in the hearth. On Christmas morning, Sarah and Cole gave Matthew a pair of new boots and a coat that actually fit him. Matthew gave them a carved wooden horse he had made with Tom Brennan's help, and when Sarah hugged him tight, Matthew hugged her back for the first time. "I love you," Sarah whispered into his hair. "I love you too, Ma," Matthew whispered back, and Sarah burst into tears. Spring of 1876 brought new challenges and new joys. Matthew flourished in his new environment, growing taller and more confident. He started attending the schoolhouse in town, making friends with the other children. At home, he chattered constantly about his day, about the things he was learning, about the games he played at recess. Sarah and Cole watched him with fierce pride. This was their son, not by blood but by choice and love and daily commitment, and it was enough, more than enough. One evening in April, after Matthew had gone to bed, Sarah and Cole sat together on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket against the cool night air. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the prairie stretched out dark and peaceful around them. "Are you happy?" Cole asked softly, his arm around Sarah's shoulders. Sarah leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and soap and home. "I am happier than I ever thought possible," she said honestly. "When I told you I could never give you children, I thought my life was over. I thought no good man would want me. But you did not just want me, Cole. You chose me. You chose us. And you gave me a family I never dreamed I could have." Cole pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You gave me a family too, Sarah. You gave me a home. A real home, not just a place to sleep. You gave me Matthew. You gave me a reason to build something that lasts. I meant what I said that day in the alley behind the saloon. All we need is to love each other. Everything else we will figure out together." Sarah turned in his arms and kissed him, slow and deep. "Together," she agreed. The years that followed were full of the ordinary joys and struggles of life. Matthew grew into a fine young man, learning ranching from Cole and eventually becoming a skilled horseman in his own right. When he was 14, Sarah and Cole officially adopted him, making permanent in law what had long been true in their hearts. But their family did not stop with Matthew. 2 years after he came to live with them, the Reverend approached Sarah and Cole about another child, a girl this time. Her name was Lily, and she was 6 years old, left orphaned when her mother died in childbirth and her father was killed in a mining accident. Lily was tiny and fierce, with red hair and a temper to match. She and Matthew fought like cats and dogs at first, but within 6 months they were inseparable. Then came Ben, a toddler found abandoned at a homestead, only 3 years old and terrified of everyone. Sarah spent weeks coaxing him out of his shell, holding him through nightmares, teaching him that he was safe. Cole taught him how to laugh again, playing silly games and carrying him around on his shoulders. By 1882, the little cabin was bursting at the seams. Cole and Tom Brennan had a long conversation, and together they decided that Cole should buy a parcel of land from the double bar. With Tom's help and a loan from the bank, Cole purchased 80 acres and began building a proper house. It took a full year, but when it was finished, the house was sturdy and spacious with 4 bedrooms and a wide porch. Sarah planted a garden out front, and Cole built a barn for their growing number of horses. They called it the Triple D Ranch for Dalton and slowly built it into a thriving operation. Sarah had long since stopped working at the Prairie Rose, too busy with the children and the ranch. But she stayed close with Mrs. Henderson, and when the older woman passed away in 1883, she left the saloon to Sarah in her will. Sarah was stunned and honored. She hired a manager to run the day-to-day operations and used the profits to fund a small school for the orphaned and abandoned children in the area. Cole and Sarah's marriage deepened and strengthened over the years. They argued sometimes, usually about money or how to handle one of the children's misdeeds, but they always talked it through. They never went to bed angry, and they never took each other for granted. Cole still looked at Sarah like she hung the moon, and Sarah still felt her heart flutter when Cole walked through the door at the end of a long day. The children grew and thrived. Matthew married a sweet girl named Emily when he was 23, and they built a house on the far corner of the Triple D property. He took over much of the day-to-day ranching, working side by side with Cole. When Matthew and Emily had their first child, a boy they named Cole, Sarah held her grandson and wept with joy. Lily grew into a beautiful, spirited woman who shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to be a teacher. Sarah and Cole supported her dream, sending her to normal school in Kansas City. She came back 2 years later with a teaching certificate and took over the small school Sarah had founded, teaching reading and arithmetic to a generation of children who might otherwise have had nothing. Ben, the quiet toddler who had been so afraid, grew into a gentle giant of a man with a gift for working with horses. He never married, content to live on the ranch and work alongside his father and brother. He was the one who sat with Cole during his illness in 1899, holding his hand through the worst of the fever. Cole survived that illness, though it left him weakened. He was 52 by then, and the years of hard ranch work had taken their toll. He and Sarah decided it was time to step back, to let Matthew and Ben run the ranch while they enjoyed a quieter pace of life. They spent their later years on the porch of the house they had built together, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Matthew and Emily had 4 children by then, and Lily had 2. The house was always full of noise and laughter and the chaos of a large, loving family. On a warm evening in June of 1908, Sarah and Cole sat together on that porch, their hands clasped, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their bodies marked by time and hard work. But Cole still looked at Sarah with the same love he had shown that day in the alley behind the saloon, and Sarah still felt like the luckiest woman alive. "Do you remember," Cole said softly, "when you told me you could never give me children?" Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "I remember. I thought it was the end of any chance at happiness. And I told you we would just love each other," Cole said, "that it would be enough." "It was enough," Sarah agreed. "But we got so much more than that, did we not? We got Matthew and Lily and Ben, we got grandchildren. We got a life full of love and purpose. We got everything that matters." Cole turned to look at her, his eyes still that same warm brown that had captured her heart 33 years ago. "We got everything because we chose each other," he said. "Because we decided that love was more important than biology, that family was about choice and commitment. Sarah Dalton, you have made my life extraordinary." "And you have made mine," Sarah whispered, leaning in to kiss him. As the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear, Sarah thought about the scared, broken young woman she had been when she first arrived in Abilene. That woman had believed she had nothing to offer, that her inability to bear children made her worthless. But Cole had seen past that. He had seen her heart, her strength, her capacity for love, and together they had built something beautiful. Their children and grandchildren eventually came spilling out of the house, calling for supper. Matthew scooped up his youngest daughter, tossing her in the air while she shrieked with laughter. Lily was deep in conversation with Emily about the new curriculum she was developing for the school. Ben was showing his nephews a rope trick, patient as always. Cole stood, offering Sarah his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Dalton. Our family is waiting." Sarah took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. She looked around at the life they had created, at the house full of love and laughter, at the ranch that had grown from a dream into a legacy. "Yes," she said, smiling up at the man who had chosen her, who had shown her that love was not about biology or perfection but about showing up every day and building something together. Our family is waiting. They walked inside together, hand in hand, surrounded by the noise and warmth of the family they had chosen, the family that had chosen them back. It was not the life Sarah had imagined when she was a young girl, but it was better. It was real and messy and beautiful and more than she had ever dared to hope for, and it had all started with a simple truth spoken in a dusty alley. Then we will love each other. That had been enough. That would always be enough. But they had been blessed with so much more, and as Sarah looked around at her children and grandchildren, at the home she and Cole had built, she knew that every moment of fear and doubt and pain had been worth it to arrive at this place, this moment, this life. Years later, long after Cole had passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, and Sarah had followed him just 6 months later, their descendants would gather at the Triple D Ranch and tell the story of how it all began. They would talk about the cowboy who had stopped a gunfight, who had courted a bookkeeper with quiet determination, who had looked past what society said mattered and saw only the woman he loved. They would talk about Sarah, who had believed she was broken but had discovered she was whole, who had mothered children not from her body but from her heart, who had built a legacy of love that echoed through generations. And they would remember the words that had started it all, the promise that had changed everything. Then we will love each other. It had been more than enough. It had been everything.